Alright, these are our notes for section 1.4 on angles. We're going to cover a lot of vocabulary and some ideas here, so again, if you have any questions, make sure you bring them to class next time. Alright, first thing we're going to do is we're going to cover some vocabulary that deals specifically with angles. Our first vocabulary word is ray, and it is, one way to think of it, is half of a line. What it does is it has an end point, and it extends infinitely in one direction. Here's what it looks like. End point, and it extends infinitely in one direction. So really it is half of a line. Now you need 2 points on there. You need an end point and then just another point. And we need 2 points so that we can name it. A ray is named starting with the end point and then whatever other point you have on the line. So let me draw a ray for us. Let's make it A and B. This would be ray AB, and we draw a little arrow above it. Now one thing that catches some people is, well, what happens if my ray points this direction? If it points to the left? B and C. How do we name that? Well, we still do the same way, but the arrow above the name always points to the right. So it would be BC, like this. It is not that. Okay? We don't do that. The ray never points to the left when we name it. It always points to the right. And we always start with the end point and go to another point on the ray. Whatever point we have. If we have 5, we could pick whatever point we want. It doesn't matter as long as it's another point on the ray. Alright, now opposite rays are 2 rays that, when put together, make a line. So we have a ray that points to the right. We also have a ray that points to the left. Those are opposite rays. Here's the end. We have one that goes to the right and one that goes to the left. So together they make a straight line. That's what opposite rays are. Now, you can think of them as a straight line. That's one way to think about it. But notice that you can split it up into 2 separate rays. That's where we get the name opposite rays. They're going opposite directions, and you have 2 rays there. All right, our last vocabulary word is angle. And the definition for angle are 2 rays that share an endpoint. All right. So if we go back to opposite rays are really an angle because they share the endpoint there. More generally, though, they don't have to make a straight line. They can make whatever shape they want. Okay, so there's an angle. They share the same endpoint. Here's another one. There's a ray. There's a ray. They share the same endpoint. They both start at the same spot. Angles are measured in degrees. Okay, remember that degree sign? You should have seen it before, like degrees Celsius, degrees Fahrenheit. This is that little O, okay, raised up to the top. That's what they're measured in. They're measured in degrees. Something that you should know. Okay, but other than that, an angle are 2 rays that share the same endpoint, and it's measured in degrees. Now, there are several different parts of an angle. First, I'm going to go over interior and exterior. Pretty basic. Interior is the inside of an angle. Exterior is the outside. So here's the interior. Here's the exterior. If I asked you to give me a point on the interior of an angle, it would just need to be inside. Exterior would be the outside. If I set a point on the angle, then it has to be on the angle itself. It's neither in or out. Okay? Some of the other things we need to know are the vertex. The vertex is that end point that they share. Okay? Now, we'll call it a vertex. We're not going to call it an endpoint, so make sure you understand that. It's got a name. It's called the vertex. The 2 sides of an angle You just need to know that they are both rays. Okay? And again, to name a ray, we start at the vertex and we go out. So the rays here would be, I just added some letters. AB is one ray, AC is the other, because we start at the end point. Notice that that letter that starts them is the same. It's the vertex of both, okay, of the angle. It should be the same for both. Okay, so those are your parts of an angle. You got the interior, the exterior, the vertex, and then the sides are rays. Next thing we're going to talk about are the different types of angles, and there are 4 different types of angles. You have acute, obtuse, right, and straight. Acute angles measure less than 90 degrees. And obtuse angles measure more than 90. And I'm pretty sure you are familiar with this stuff. Okay? Obtuse angles, they stop at 180 though. Okay, stop at 180. Because a 180 degree angle is what we call a straight angle. And 180 degrees makes a line. Okay, so a whole bunch of ideas come together right here with the straight angle. You could have a straight angle, which is the same thing as a line, which is the same thing as opposite rays. They all look the same, okay? And they all measure 180 degrees, and that's important. Those 3 ideas, straight angle, opposite rays, and a line, are all the same picture. They will all look the same, okay? The last type of angle we have is as a right angle, and it measures exactly 90 degrees. Okay, so let's add some pictures. An acute angle is going to be something less than 90, and a 90 degree angle looks like this. And we put that little triangle, or sorry, not triangle, we put the little box down in the corner to show that it's a right angle. Okay, so an acute angle is going to be less than that, and an obtuse angle is going to be more than that. A straight angle is going to be a straight line. Okay, 180 degrees. All right, so those are your different types of angles. Next thing we're going to talk about is some more vocabulary. Okay, and these are words that you will see throughout the year again, so make sure that you understand what they mean. Bisect is really important. Bisect means it cuts something in half. And it depends on what we're talking about. You can bisect a line segment, you can bisect an angle, which is what we're going to look at here in a minute. But bisect means it cuts it in half. Okay? So 2 equal pieces. Now, another way to say equal pieces would be congruent. So it splits it into 2 congruent parts. We're going to bisect, and this is what a midpoint does, and we talked a little bit about this the other day in class. A midpoint bisects a line segment. Cuts it into 2 equal pieces. Now, we can't have a midpoint on an angle. What we do is we have what's called an angle bisector. And an angle bisector can be a ray, or a line segment. And what it does is it splits an angle into 2 congruent equal parts. Alright, so this is what that looks like. We could have a ray or a line. I'm going to extend that out with a dotted line just to show you that it could be a line. Could have a line segment too. I could take this arrow and make it a point. But what it does is it splits it into 2 equal pieces. So if my whole angle, let's suppose my whole angle was 80 degrees. That means each one of these is 40. cuts it directly in half. And that's the idea that you need to know. An angle bisector will cut it in half into two equal congruent pieces. Now, to show two angles are congruent, we use the same idea we use for a line segment. Remember, for a line segment, we used it earlier. We use those hash marks. Well, we do the same idea for an angle, except we're not going to mark the sides, we're going to mark the inside. So we could show it like this. Draw arc inside, and then we put a hash mark on each arc. And we need to use the same number of hash marks for each one to show that they're congruent. So, those two angles are congruent. Here's one of an angle bisector. We're going to mark these congruent. Okay, that angle bisector cuts it in half, so now we have two equal pieces. And that's how we show two angles are congruent. Okay? Last thing we're going to talk about in this video is how to name an angle, and there's two ways to name an angle. First one is to use a number. And that number should be in the angle. You can't add it to it, okay? It should be inside the angle. And what we do is we use a small angle, and then we put whatever number it is. So if we go down to our examples here, this is angle 1. This is angle 2, okay? That one's pretty simple. Whatever number is inside, we draw an angle, and you usually use an acute angle. Out in front, or we always use an acute angle. Don't use an obtuse or a right, just always use an acute angle. Doesn't matter what size it is. You can tell by looking at the figure what size it is, but we use an acute angle, small acute angle, and then the number. Okay? Second way is to use points. Okay, and if we're going to use points, it needs to go side, vertex, side. Okay? We again use the small angle, the acute angle, to name it, and then we go side, vertex, side. So let's look at these examples here, and we work our way around. I'm going to start at A. I'm going to draw an arrow because it helps us see which direction we're going. We would have angle. We're going to start at A, C, B. Now, if I had another point on there, let's suppose I had M. I added that to it, okay? I have point M on that side. I don't need to have 2 points. This is not it. A, M, C, B. No, that doesn't work. We only need 1 point from each side in the vertex, okay? So that is wrong. Now we could go the other direction too. I could go angle B, C, A. That's also acceptable. Just going the opposite way. So either of those names are fine. Here's our last example on how to name. We have angle M, R, K. Go in this direction. We could go the other direction and have K, R, M. Same thing, same angle, just a different way of naming it. Alright, so those are your notes on angles. The mostly vocabulary and how to name and congruent and angle bisector, all of that stuff. So if you have any questions, please ask them in class.